Hello there, everyone. Welcome back to the class, both to new and long-time students and lovers of history. This is History with Si here today to explore with you further our studies on Charles I and the Stuart monarchy. And in this video, we're going to look at the rise of Arminianism, particularly through the years 1625 to 1630. So if you haven't checked out our earlier videos where we explored the background on the monarchy, especially the ones on religious division, make sure you've done that before carrying on with this video. With all that said, notepads and pens at the ready, and let us begin. So as said, this video is carrying on our initial series, where now we've looked at what's happened with the monarchy and parliament and the tensions they were experiencing, particularly over things like the economy and the action of the crown when it's divine right, especially during the Darnell's case. In this one, we're going to focus much more on the religious division and tension that indeed could be the origins, or certainly, of course, causing the issues that are happening between the monarchy and parliament. We have to understand the religious link between parliament and Charles I's relationship and how that has a clear effect on what is happening with them. We also have to explore what key events are occurring that rose these concerns about Charles's religious allegiance. We touched on his actions with Henrietta Maria and marrying her, but is there something deeper, something stronger than just the monarch's own choice of his wife? Particularly, how did Charles and the Parliament differ in their religious beliefs? How different actually are they? Or is there some nuanced issue that is really causing the crux of the problem here? And then, can we then apply this knowledge to our previous learning, where now we can summarize the key reasons for Charles starting his personal rule by dissolving Parliament in 1629? Because everything I'm going to tell you in this video, this was happening concurrently with all the foreign policy and economic issues that Charles and Parliament were experiencing in 1625 to 1629. So with that said, let's jump right into it. So a quick recap on the religions of the Stuart age in 1625, because again it's important to really understand what situation Charles has inherited from his father. Now there are numerous religions, but the main ones to focus on are the Protestants. This is the dominant religion in England, having split from the Catholic Church during the reign of Henry VIII. And from that, numerous variations have started: the Anglican Church, Puritans, and the Arminians. They all interpret the same scripture, but they all have slightly different ways in how they operate, particularly with their masses. Again, check back on the religious divisions video if you want a more detailed view on the three differences. But in general, all three do, of course, ally under the monarchy and, of course, are following the ways of England at this time. In terms of Scotland, their Presbyterian control with a deep influence from Calvinism that really takes that further, and the ideas of predestination. And then Ireland has a majority of Catholics, the only nation in the kingdom right now that, of course, adheres more to Catholicism than it does to Protestant beliefs. And again, remember, the monarchy is situated in London, so therefore they should be practicing the Protestant views throughout the kingdom. So what exactly is Charles I's own stance on religion? Well, we already know he's relatively quite liberal. After all, he married Henrietta Maria, who was a Catholic, and he allowed her to carry on her own private ceremonies while surrounded by Catholic advisors. And again, he did this against Parliament's own wishes and beliefs. So again, he's already rebelling in some way against Parliament's own standing, their own Protestant belief and value systems. Charles also directly appoints someone called William Laud as the Bishop of London. So again, he had three choices. He could have chosen a Calvinist, he could have chosen an Arminian, he could have chosen an Anglican. He chose an Arminian cleric, which you should remember from our division video, is in terms of the Protestant religions, leaning the most closely to Catholicism. So already Charles is now going to allow Laud to commit to some clear reforms of the Church of England, and these changes would therefore move the church away from its Anglican roots and more closer to Catholicism. So Charles already, as the head of state, is already doing things that are going to worry the Protestants in Parliament. So as a consequence of having William Laud become the Bishop of London, we have a clear rise of Arminianism in the first 4 years of Charles's reign. Already, the presence of a Catholic in London so close to arguably the closest anyone can ever be towards the monarch, is therefore arousing a lot of suspicion in Parliament, especially amid all the tensions in Europe during the 30 Years' War. However, William Laud, as an Arminian, supported her presence because he saw the Catholic Church as the true church, unlike the Puritans in Parliament. Again, in terms of Puritanism and Arminianism, they're at complete either ends of one another. And in terms of these Protestant religions, they're the ones that are going to disagree on the most things. So it's quite key that Laud, as an Arminian, is the one with the most power here. Indeed, after the Duke of Buckingham's death, with him now gone, religion became the biggest concern for Parliament. With Buckingham no longer there as a scapegoat for all the problems that were happening, they began touching on deeper issues. Rather than an individual, what about the actual principles and root causes of the divisions on religion? Indeed, many Puritan MPs feared that the shift towards Arminianism would actually lead to a Catholic takeover linked with Spain. Again, they're already struggling in the war. They're financially crippled, they're financially broke, and they're now struggling to hold back the Spanish and the French. So they believe this is some way to be usurped and that they're going to be converted into a Catholic nation and then rejoin Spain and France that way. John Eliot has led efforts to resist what he saw as a popish threat. Now, this term, as we've said, is quite derogatory towards Catholics, and so this kind of language that's being used clearly shows that deep down, the Puritans and the Protestants in Parliament hate the Arminians and the Catholics, and there's clearly a lot of tension between them that makes it very difficult to compromise and get along. Eliot, in particular, leads the cause to Charles of breach the petition of right in 1629, particularly with how he was imprisoning the merchants and promoting Arminianism rather than Puritanism. We touched a lot on the Darnell's case and the suspension of the petition of right in our last video, but this one shows that religion was quite deeply embroiled with it. Particularly, they ignored Charles's orders to suspend Parliament when they held the Speaker down, and one of the key things they promoted was not just the removing of the collection of tonnage and poundage and condemning people who didn't pay it to prison, but also for promoting Arminianism and these religious changes, which Eliot personally declared was promoting something that was the capital enemy of what England and the kingdoms were built around. We should remember then that Charles dissolved that parliament and had John Eliot imprisoned in the Tower of London. This was the beginning of Charles's personal rule without Parliament or MPs at all. And so it's really so important we remember here that although we had foreign policy, although we had economic issues, religion was already deeply embroiled in it right from the get-go. And so that's going to play a key role in how we assess these causes and consequences as we go along in our series. So now with religion involved here, what exactly is the situation by 1629? Well, it's clear that Parliament does not trust Charles because already they distrusted the Duke of Buckingham and believed he influenced Charles to lean towards these Arminian and Catholic influences right from the start. I mean, appointing William Laud as the Bishop of London was clear showing of that. The fight against Spain and France, which were Catholic countries, and Britain was opposing as a Protestant nation in this 30 Years' War, had rose fears of Catholic influence, not helped by Henrietta Maria being married to Charles, and therefore England felt itself under threat from Catholic-leaning sympathies. And of course, to take it all further, Charles has suspended habeas corpus, had ignored the petition of right, and by continuing to imprison those who opposed him, especially John Eliot, there appeared to be a clear religious bias in what Charles was doing. By him openly supporting Arminians and Catholic influence and going against Puritans, especially like John Eliot, there's a clear religious war here that's happening behind the scenes. So there's a clear way we can interpret this as yes, it's not the economy, yes, it's not the advisors, it's actually about religion, and that's the clear underpinning throughout all of this. Likewise, Charles decides to dissolve the Parliament because they refused to grant him tonnage and poundage the same way they had done for his father, who, of course, was more sympathetic towards Protestant causes. Parliament did not like his advisor and even openly celebrated his own death. Parliament were also very, very suspicious of the Catholic wife Henrietta Maria, so again, another religious influence engaging there. I mean, just imagine how Charles felt hearing Eliot say those things, popish threat, popish plot, knowing they're talking about his own wife. I mean, these slurs, this derogatory language would really anger the king further. And of course, the passing of the three resolutions, which were directly impeaching his own policies and the way they went about it by holding the speaker down and outright declaring Arminianism as such as a capital enemy, that would really go against what Charles wanted to support. And so we can summarize all three of the causes here under three key issues: money, religion, and advisors. So, a little bit of advice if you were going to consider using this content for an essay. Again, it's always better to try and split these issues thematically rather than chronologically. Although our video series together explores these issues in one linear line from the start to the end. Again, when you're looking at it, try and look at what the key themes are, the key influences throughout the era. So, of course, money is there throughout with tonnage and poundage and the religious struggles and the foreign policy struggles. Advisors were clearly there with the Duke of Buckingham and William Laud, both of which Parliament hated. They openly were very cautious of the Duke of Buckingham and have called indirectly religion underpins the whole thing as well. It's a religious war in Europe, the 30 Years' War, that is being enacted here. So it's important to bear all this in mind when you assess them. Don't look at it as the Duke in isolation, Charles in isolation, Parliament in isolation. Try and combine them together under their respective themes of money, religion, and advisors. So there we are. I hope that you found that quite useful, getting a bit more detail about the religious influences there and how they have indeed affected the relation between Crown and Parliament. Do, of course, feel free, as always, to ask me any questions further, particularly maybe about how we summarize these themes into money, religion, and advisors, and how we would go about applying them to our analytical skills in our essays. Do make sure you check out our further videos. We're now going to explore that personal rule and indeed the 11 years tyranny. Is it really tyrannical? Has Charles become a tyrant in waiting by his actions he's done here in the early years of 1625 to 29? Or are we actually going to see that Charles is going to become better and actually maybe he's going to have a much more successful time without these relations with Parliament getting in the way of his rule? Again, there's two sides to every story. So we're going to explore that further. Thank you as always for watching. Thank you as always for listening. Do make sure you engage in the comments and section below and subscribe and like if you haven't already. This is History with Sire, and thank you for listening.